Hi, my name is Hailey, and my favorite thing is fountain pens.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. It is late on Sunday, December 5th, 11 p.m., the eighth and final night of Hanukkah, and I spent almost the entire day sleeping. Not entirely true. I got up this morning, had a wonderful breakfast with my friend Jonathan, who was in town, dropped him off at the airport, came back, and then sat down for a few minutes and slept for 4 hours. Why, you ask? Well, let's see. Friday, I started my second round of chemo. So as I've learned, a round of chemo is 3 weeks. So I'm 4 weeks in now to my 12 weeks of chemo. Started my second round. So second round of 4 rounds. A lot of math, a lot of fractions with chemo. Last night, a dear group of friends, Ezra, Sarah Beth, Amy, Jonathan, Mike, Rocco, all helped host the annual Latke party, my annual Hanukkah party that I've been doing, 10 or 15 years. Not 15. Not quite 15, but I've been having this party on the Saturday night of Hanukkah for over a decade. It's one of my most favorite traditions. It's like an open house. I cook latkes all night. And in January of this year, I ordered magnetic save the dates and started sending them out so we'd all have something to look forward to. And then I got diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was so sad that I had jinxed myself by sending out invitations too early for this party. I was so sad. And my friends were just like, absolutely not. The party's not canceled. And Ezra, who is my upstairs neighbor, did Amy and Sarah Beth and Rocco cooked all day. My neighbor Mike made cocktails. We had 2 fire pits in the backyard. So we had fire, s'mores, magic fire, glow sticks. If there's something we've learned during COVID, it's that we can socialize outdoors a lot more of the year than we ever have. So a double fire pit backyard party in December is pretty rockin'. I wore my new fancy dress from Fringe & Co., a TikTok made me buy it dress. I shaved my head this week. My hair started to fall out. And I got to talk to a lot of people last night. But while I'm physically still feeling pretty good, I really had a hard time just talking to people last night, finding the words. I described my brain as being like peppermint, but what I meant was Swiss cheese. So I came inside to change my clothes before the party was over and kind of fell asleep on my recliner. And then I slept all day today, and thus the late edit and late release. I'm going to update the show notes tomorrow. I have so many great notes for this episode with Hailey talking about fountain pens. But what I'm going to do is just get this posted, the audio posted tonight, and all the links up tomorrow. So I'm talking to Hailey Dezort. She's a book publicist here in Chicago. We talk about fountain pens. We talk about comic books. And you are going to have a new hobby to try at the end of this conversation with Hailey. So wear masks, wash your hands, get that booster shot if you're eligible. Wait, I think we're all eligible now. Kids are getting their shots, their vaccines. Grown-ups are getting their boosters. It's good. And I'll just keep marching through this chemo stuff. Thank you to everyone who has helped me again with meals, with chores, with organizing, with visits. I really feel well taken care of by all my hospital husbands, regardless of gender and regardless of whether or not you actually have gone with me to the hospital. So keep enjoying your favorite things. Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is the podcast where we learn about people's favorite things and we get recommendations without using an algorithm. Today, it is a gloomy Sunday morning in Chicago, and so I am really thrilled to be able to have a nice conversation, bring some sunshine inside. I'm talking with Hailey Dezort. Hailey is a marketing and events coordinator in the books industry, and also is here in gloomy Chicago today. Hailey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I mean, what a way to perk up a Sunday because it's just raining all day. So I'm
Yeah,
happy to be here.
I am too. Otherwise I would have I'm pretty sure slept until the sunset, you know?
Truly, I woke up and was like, what time is it? Where am I? Because it was still dark out at like 10 a.m. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird one. But there's still, I live across the street from Winamac Park, and there's still baseball happening. So those poor kids and parents.
The commitment is great to see, but I would not be one of those people. Like, I like the warmth.
Yeah. So Hailey, you're in books. This fall I've been talking to a lot of authors.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find yourself doing working in the books industry and doing marketing and event coordination?
Yeah, so it started out as a really young desire to be in the industry. I was in high school and loved reading, and it was a passion of mine, but I was never a writer, and also just like a really terrible editor. Like I struggle with the grammar sometimes, editing people's papers. And I was thinking about what else I could do in order to work adjacent to books. Like, who are these people that bring a book into the world beside an author? And so after lots of Googling, I realized that there's a whole publishing industry, and I took a marketing course in high school that I loved, and my teacher was super sweet and told me I was good at, and kind of from there it just sparked that journey for me to just really push myself to do that. I just had total tunnel vision, and then was like, I am going to do this thing.
Wow.
And then I'm here.
That's amazing. I definitely did not know that book marketing was a thing in high school.
Yeah, I don't think most people, unless you're in the industry, honestly,
right.
I don't think people actually even think about it as adults if you're a reader even.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Like, how did this book get into my house? Oh, I don't know. I bought it. I went to my local bookstore and I bought it. Yeah, I was talking to someone recently about, in high school, the professions, at least that I knew about, like teachers, nursing, lawyers, you know what you see on TV and what your parents do and what your friends' parents do. And other than that, like, those are your possible futures.
Exactly. And I think it's really, like you're saying, the things that are on TV. So there's since then been some TV shows, like, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Younger. It has Hilary Duff in it, and she works in the publishing industry, but they're both editors. And so it really becomes like you can be an author or you can be an editor. And everyone assumes, like, I think outside of the book industry, that if you're working in it, that you want to write a book. And I definitely have no desire to do that, but I love so much finding readers for the books that we're working on and finding that perfect match, because when someone really loves a book and connects with it, it's just such a great feeling to know that you had a hand in that, and you see it and you're like, yes.
Yeah. So are all the books behind you books that you have worked with, or some of them are your personal collection and some of them are your authors?
So most of the ones that you see behind me are my personal collection. And then I have a bookshelf that is a little bit out of the frame right now that is all of the books that I've worked on.
Okay.
And so they accumulate very quickly, though. I will say I slowly start to run out of room and have to kind of go through everything I own and, donate some things to better homes. But I own a lot of books. For anyone listening, I have probably over, I want to say, like 300 books in my office library situation right now.
Yeah, just in one room. And I remember, oh my gosh, it was probably 15 years ago. I don't remember her name, but her blog was called Book Slut.
Oh, I love.
She was
Yeah, I
very
think I know the
famous.
blog. Hmm.
Yeah. And I got invited to a party at her house. So that's awful. I'm like, I don't remember her name, but I was in her house. And she had, every line walled with bookshelves, but then also like just stacks of books. It was like out of, like an illustrate. It felt like you were in a children's book, or just because it was like stacks and stacks. You could imagine like a Tommy DePaulo. Like it was almost like a Strega Nona of books situation.
I love it. I try so hard not to have books on the floor. I'm one of those people who in theory, I really like things to look like not cluttered and really clean and almost minimalistic. And yet I love books. And so we hit that wall. So I'm always either trying to do like a spring cleaning or buying more bookshelves that then make it just look nicer, because books on the floor, though aesthetically can look really cute I see on like Instagram and other people's homes, and I love it for them. For me, I'm distressed. I'm like, I need to clean.
Right. Well, also, God forbid you have a flood. The books on the floor have no chance.
Yes, I could not. Oh, my heart thinking about that.
Yeah. So Hailey, did you have any, it's a gloomy fall Sunday, but did you get to have any nice fall adventures?
Yeah, I had, yesterday I went for a walk in Andersonville, and then I also went down to Pilsen. So in Chicago, totally opposite neighborhoods.
Wow.
But I started the morning sitting at a coffee shop, journaling and reading, which I haven't been to a coffee shop in forever to just sit and do that. So it felt like such a treat. And then my boyfriend and I went to Pilsen and explored some bookstores.
Nice.
And grabbed a cocktail and some food at, if anyone who's listening in Chicago, try out Pilsen Yards. It is so delicious. I was first time there and was blown away.
What are the bookstores in Pilsen?
So Pilsen Community Books is there, and they're really great. They're owned by two people that I really adore, Catherine Sulheim and Mandy Medley. They do a lot of work to bring in kind of like political titles that just like really inform people, like the movements that are happening.
Yeah.
And they're just really involved in community organizing. But they also just have such a great selection of fiction and poetry, and also Spanish language books for the community as well, because they're based in Pilsen, which is prominently Spanish speaking. And then Open Books, which is a nonprofit organization, has two locations, and one of them is in Pilsen.
Okay.
And it's basically like a huge warehouse of just used books, which is really wonderful to walk through. So those are the two down there that are just really lovely. And Pilsen is really gorgeous. Like when you walk in, it's these floor to ceiling wood bookshelves, and it's like everything you kind of want a bookstore to look like. It's just so aesthetically cozy and great.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like a lovely way to spend a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. The sun was finally out, and so I took advantage of it.
Yeah. Like I was telling you, my nephew and I went to the Chicago Green Theater Alliance, which is like all these Chicago theaters that are, I guess, trying to make it possible to reuse, reduce, recycle. They had an e-waste drop-off, but they had a costume and clothing swap at the Children's Theater in Chicago. And it was just, like when there's contemporary clothes, but then you pick up something and it's like Northwestern, Pirates of Penzance, Charles Jones's pants. So like some of the clothes had like the
I love that
theater, the production, the artist's name or the actor's name in it. I took one sign of a box that said, it was like, getting out of the business, novelty costumes and wigs. And I was like, I love it. I love it. I want to know everything about this person.
Right? There's a story behind that. That's so
Mm-hmm.
fun. You're digging through it and you're like, it's more than just these costumes. You're getting some kind of mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a awesome adventure in its own.
Yeah. Or you'd hit a pile of, oh, it's a dozen green skirts. You know, it's 5 jackets with white jackets with red pockets. So you would also get a sense of like how big the chorus was, or I don't know. I thought it was really interesting.
That's so awesome. I wonder how they accumulated everything, especially like the going out of business.
Mm-hmm.
Was it just donations or, yeah, because I've never heard of this before. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Some of it came in wardrobe boxes. And some of it, a woman arrived when we arrived in an SUV, and it seemed like the person in her social group helping collect clothes for various causes. A friend was
Mm-hmm.
moving out of town. They had collected for refugees and then didn't need all the clothes they had collected. And she had like 12 or more bags
Oh my
of
gosh.
clothes and blankets and pillows. So when her stuff got there, they just put they were like, this pile is sorting. And it was just a pile of garbage bags that people started going through. Somebody got a whole comforter set.
That's wonderful. Good for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. But there's also, I don't know, like tailored, really high quality clothes, really silly costumes. There was a hat section that I was like, ooh, do I need a Viking hat? No, Leah, you
Yes.
don't. You don't need a
I
Viking
think
hat.
the answer is actually yes.
Yeah, I might go back. We'll see. But it was really nice to have like the windows open and drive through the city on a sunny day. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I hope we get more of those before winter comes.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm fine with the cooler temps, but I'm gonna need some sunshine mix in
Yes,
for sure.
100%. Give me more fall moments.
Hmm. So Hailey, you are someone with a lot of favorite things.
Yes.
What are we going to talk about today?
We are going to talk about my fountain pen collection.
Ooh. Now, it looked like you had, before we started recording, like you had pulled it in front of you. And did you unroll it?
Yeah, so I just unrolled one of
One.
the little cases that I have.
Ooh.
So this is like a pen roll, and then I have several. It houses 6. Let me pull these out so you could just see the variety. There is like a purple celluloid. This one is called an Esterbrook. This one is like it's a fountain pen, but when you push it pops out.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like I don't know why I'm
It's
forgetting
like a
the name.
clicky pen.
It's a clicky
It's a
pen.
very fancy clicky pen. It's silver. It's a lavender, shiny lavender, and kind of looks like a James Bond weapon.
Yes, and it's called Pilot Decimo. And
Okay.
then this one here is an Aurora veneer. It's limited to 888 in the world, and they're made in Italy. And then this one is really fun. It's a Mont Blanc Marilyn Monroe, and the pen shape is meant to look like a high heel, like the bottom of
Oh,
a
it looks
high
like a
heel.
stiletto. Yeah.
Hmm. It has a little pearl on the clip, and then on the nib is what
Mm-hmm.
has an engraving of Marilyn Monroe on it.
Wow.
Hmm. And it has her signature and engraved on the bottom finial is what they call like the bottom of the pen,
Mm-hmm.
and little diamonds engraved for the song that she sings. So
Wow. Amazing.
yeah. So those are just some of the,
That's just a quick glance.
yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning.
Hmm.
How did you, um, when did you either receive your first fountain pen or did they come on your radar and you were like, oh, I've got to get one?
So I've always been really into stationery, and I was that kid, which I feel like this is a lot of fountain pen collectors' origin stories, where you're that kid that loves school supply shopping so
Mm-hmm.
much. And I loved like buying different pens and color coding my notes and doing all of
Yeah.
those things. I just loved the experience. And so I've always really enjoyed stationery. And I there in Andersonville, there used to be this stationery shop called Martha May, and it was
Mm-hmm.
one of the most beautiful stores I've ever walked into, just like design wise.
Right.
And she had these Kueko Sports, which are these little pocket pens that are really
Mm-hmm.
cute. And I opened it up, and it was a fountain pen, and I was just really intrigued by that.
Right.
And so I tried writing with it, and it was just a really fun experience. And one of the cool aspects of a fountain pen is that you can change out the ink, so it can
Mm-hmm.
be different colors. And then there was an array of inks like purples and
Mm-hmm.
greens, and so I bought that. And for the longest time I was just writing with that. But like anything else that I slowly get into, I like dive really hard into like
Mm-hmm.
research. And so I started just Googling on the internet that there were like all of these other pen brands, and there was like all
Mm-hmm.
of these different fountain pens. And then I discovered that there are pen shows.
Oh.
I know. There are full conventions for sellers and
Mm-hmm.
buyers to come where they showcase tons of pens.
Oh.
So
So
I and
so this was then a pre-COVID discovery for you.
yeah, so I got into fountain pens around 2018.
Okay. Because I thought Martha May was a pencil shop. Did she have a lot of pencils too?
She did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she had pencils as well. It was a lot of art stuff. It was like
Okay.
fountain pens, it was pencils, it was paints and
Mm-hmm.
watercolors and things of that sort. So
Okay.
there was a lot there, and I just gravitated. I saw these little Quaco sports and then was in love. And I decided I wanted to go to the Chicago Pen Show.
Sure.
And I was super nervous because I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I have no idea what to expect. And I just kind of assumed that there would be like all of these, like, I don't know, old, like gruff men with like
Mm-hmm.
their like fountain pens. And it was such a wonderful experience. And I started listening to other podcasts that were about fountain pens. So I was learning more. So there's this
Mm-hmm.
podcast called The Pen Addict, and that I just learned a lot through.
Yeah.
And I went to the fountain pen show, and there was a ton of people of all ages, which was
Mm-hmm.
really, really cool. But people who just had so much more information about fountain pens and how they write. And I was so delighted. There was all of these fancy inks with like glitter, or they
Ooh.
shaded, and they had like different, they call chroma shaders, where when you put it down on paper, it's like a blue and then a pink and then a purple. It gives off different hues.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what was so funny to me, but in a really great way, um, they have pen show after dark, where everyone just goes to a bar and like opens up these pen cases, and then everyone just like hangs out and drinks and like writes with each other's pens. And there's like people who have like collections of like 100 or more. They have like
Mm-hmm.
really rare, really expensive, like pens that are worth thousands of dollars, and you're just like, I can't believe I'm touching a pen that's like
Right.
$5,000 in my hand. And the community was really great. And after that, I kind of like then spiraled, and I bought like a couple more fountain pens, and
Mm-hmm.
it just like became a whole thing.
Wow. So I'm I kind of want to pause
Mm-hmm.
slightly. When you pulled out one of the pens, you said, and this is the filial,
Finial.
finial.
Yeah.
maybe walk us through the basics of a fountain pen. I feel like
Yeah.
it's such a cliche gift. Like I received one when I graduated from grad school, and I maybe addressed a few envelopes with it, but I didn't know, like, I don't know how to make one part of my day, but like, what are the parts of a fountain pen?
Yeah. So for a fountain pen, you have the cap. And then on a cap, the top part usually, or not usually, sometimes there is an emblem. So
Mm-hmm.
for this like Mont Blanc, there's a little Mont Blanc star. And so this would
Okay.
be a top finial. And then same with the bottom. It's like the absolute kind of end of like the pen barrel and the cap.
Okay.
So typically those are what you would call like finials.
Okay.
Um, there is the pen itself, which is like the barrel, and then it has the nib,
Mm-hmm.
which is the like where you're writing with what you're writing with.
Right.
And underneath the nib is a feeder, which is a usually kind of like black, I think ebonite material that feeds the ink into the nib.
Okay. And it usually has like horizontal cuts in it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
horizontal lines right under the nib. And then depending on what kind of fountain pen you have, this one, if I unscrew it, the pen barrel, if I unscrew it from the nib, there you can put a little cartridge of
Okay.
ink, or there are cartridge converters that look like a little almost suction, and you
Uh-huh.
turn it and it sucks up the ink from maybe a bottle of ink if you have it,
Okay.
and
Yep.
then you can connect it to the nib and then put the
Mm.
pen barrel back on. And so what's really fun about that aspect is that you can try all sorts of different inks and write with also like different colors. Like for me, that's like such a fun aspect is
Mm-hmm.
personalizing the writing experience. And that and some pens, I'll show you another one, have a piston filler.
Ooh.
So I have another Mont Blanc. It's called the Egyptomania. It
Mm-hmm.
has little hieroglyphs on the side of it for Mont Blanc.
Mm-hmm.
And then it has a scarab
Ooh, on the nib.
on the nib because it is like a celebration of the discovery of Tutankhamun. And so they
Mm-hmm.
came out with this whole line. But basically, with this, in order to fill it, you would put the nib in a bottle of ink and you would twist the top of it and it would
Mm-hmm.
come up, and then you would twist it back down and then the ink would be suctioned in
Oh, neat.
from the nib section. And so that's some of the sometimes more expensive fountain
Mm-hmm.
pens will have that kind of filling system.
Okay.
So what's interesting with fountain pens is that there's really different designs and the ways that they look, but then even how they kind of function themselves. Is it
Yeah.
cartridge only, converter filler, piston filler? And so that's what makes it really cool when you can geek out about like, oh, I really like this filling system, or I like how this works.
Right. Thank you. That helps. I know it's going to help all the other questions coming. So we go back to the Chicago Pen Convention, and you're
Mhm.
at Pens After Dark.
Yes.
Um, and how many fountain pens did you walk away with from that convention?
I think like four.
Yeah.
I had four fountain pens, and one I had actually, people would trade fountain pens, like, oh, I
Okay.
really want that. And so someone had traded my first. So I have a Pilot Decimo, which is like the clicky fountain
Mm-hmm.
pen. And what I started to learn with fountain pens, so with the nib, there are different widths. You can get a fine nib, a medium nib, a broad nib,
Mm-hmm.
an italic, and that shifts kind of how you write with it. If you like inks that you like seeing like really wet pens and it being a little bit softer, maybe you go with like a wider nib, like a medium or broad. But if
Mm-hmm.
you like really fine writing and you like really thin points, you would do maybe a fine or an extra fine. And so that was like something that I was like testing out all of these pens. Like, what do I
Okay.
really like to write with? What suits my handwriting style?
Right.
But then I also didn't realize that certain nibs are made with different materials. So
Mm.
Pilot Decimo is actually made with 14 karat gold.
Okay.
So with that, it makes the material is like softer and bouncier. So it makes
Mm-hmm.
the writing experience really smooth and really like easy on the hand
Yeah.
versus a steel nib is has a little bit more stiffness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which depending on the brand, like it would still be a really smooth writing experience, but it's not going to have that kind of bounce. So it just feels different in the hand when you're
Yeah.
writing. And that's like something I just like had no idea about until people were like,
Sure.
hey, this is like what this pen, and so someone traded me, I forget what, like I gave them, but they gave me a Pilot Decimo, and that was my first experience with a 14 karat gold nib. And I was like, this is magic. The way
Mm.
that it feels like butter in your hand. Like it's
Yeah.
just super smooth on the paper.
Yeah. And do you just write on notebook paper? Do you just write on paper? What type of paper do you use when you use a fountain pen?
So there are a lot of different notebook brands that are fountain pen friendly. Um, Tomoe River is like a huge one within the fountain pen community, but it has like a thin paper.
Mm-hmm.
But a reason why a lot of people really like it is because it shows off the properties of ink. So if you're a person that's like, I like all of these colors of ink or glitters or shimmer, that is a really fun one. I currently use Misubi's Cosmo Air Light folios.
Mm-hmm.
They just write really smoothly with the pens. I think they show off the ink properties really well. And there's this thing with fountain pen ink, because you're laying down like lots of like colorful inks. This thing that people can experience, it's called ghosting. So when you
Mm-hmm.
put so much ink on the paper that it sees through, just almost like if you're painting
Yeah.
watercolor on paper, you could see it come through. With Cosmo Air Light, you don't really get ghosting.
Okay.
So it makes it, when I'm journaling, really easy for me to like write and then, turn the page and then continue writing with all of my various colored inks,
Yeah.
and it's not distracting. But I would say there's also Midori paper,
Mm-hmm.
which is really great. And these are like cheap options as well. They're not like you don't necessarily have to spend like a lot of money to get paper in order for it to work for your
Yeah.
fountain pen. But there's a lot of websites like pen shops and storefronts that
Mm-hmm.
have a variety of fountain pen friendly paper. So in Chicago, there's a place called Atlas Stationers that has like
Mm-hmm.
all of these notebooks downtown. When I was first diving into fountain pens, there's a website called Goulet Pens, and they have a YouTube channel where they basically walk you through like fountain pen 101. And they
Wow.
have like this whole series of videos, and the people who record the videos are so funny and just really
Mm-hmm.
great to watch in general. It doesn't feel really dry and boring. So
Yeah.
that's also a good place to start for people who maybe have like more questions or want to get into it and are curious.
So it sounds like fountain pens are part of your daily life.
Yes. Yeah. I work from home full time, and I work always on the computer. And so one of the aspects to that is just feeling fatigue from being on the
Mm-hmm.
computer or having screen time. And so a way for me to decompress is to journal. I read a lot, so I like keeping reading journals.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that when I type notes on the computer, I like never go back to them. I never like sit there and like look over them.
Right.
Even for work, I have like a work notebook that I keep all
Yeah.
of my notes in. And so much gets lost when I actually just dump it onto my computer, if it's mostly only for me, if it's
Yeah.
like notes for me to remember. And so with me writing notes for work or creating strategies or doing a reading journal or even just a personal journal of my
Mm-hmm.
thoughts every day, having that experience be so fun and like
Mm-hmm.
picking up like, oh, I want to write with this pen today, just it makes the experience more fun and gives it a little bit more flair.
Yeah.
Um, and it brings a lot of enjoyment.
Yeah. So some of the pens you've shown me have ink wells and have ink in
Yeah.
them.
Mhm.
Do you store you're like, oh, I'm going to write with the Marilyn Monroe pen today because she's got purple ink and I'm in a purple mood? Or do you say like, I want this pen and then you swap out the color? Or like, what goes into deciding what pen or you're in the mood for?
Yeah, so I tend to match my inks with my pen so that I like the pair. Like so it comes
Mm-hmm.
kind of as like a package deal
Yeah.
for the most part, where I'm like, oh, I have this really lovely purple in my Aurora Optima, which is like a purple, like lilac color,
Mm-hmm.
the pen itself. And then I'll be like, okay, I wanna write with that. And sometimes I in my journals, typically once you start going down the fountain pen and like the notebooks,
Yeah.
oftentimes people do the whole like stationery. So I have like stickers and washi tapes. And so I
Yeah.
decorate my journals. And then if I'm using certain colors, I'll pick the pen that has the color.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other pens where you just end up gravitating towards for a period of time because they're really nice to write with. You're like, I'm really
Mm-hmm.
enjoying writing with this one. And so oftentimes that's how it'll happen. I have a Pelican, which is an they have different numbers to designate the size, and it's
Mm-hmm.
called a Pelican M405. And it is a white barrel, and I have this like glittery blue pink ink in it.
Oh.
And the ink is called Mystic Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
They always have these really fun names that kind of give a story to it, which I think when objects have stories behind it, it's easier to form an emotional attachment to
Yeah.
or to kind of identify with it in a certain way. And so that's something that I love the writing experience of that pen, but I absolutely love how that ink looks. So I'm constantly writing with it and picking it up just because I want glitter on my pages.
Yeah. Are fountain pens like use it or lose it? Like, do you have to write with them regularly? Do you store them with ink in them? Or do they need to be dry? Like, what's the proper, I guess,
Maintenance.
store maintenance? Yes, that's the word.
Yeah, so I typically store them horizontal in my little pen cases,
Mm-hmm.
and I do store them with ink, like they have ink in them. I have probably like 20 fountain pens inked up right now, and
Mm-hmm.
I just can't use 20 fountain pens every single day. And for the most part, I try to rotate through them, but like I said, I have favorites that I gravitate to more frequently. They recommend, you know, for fountain pen maintenance to clean your pens regularly. I will say there's been like months where I'm like, oh, I forgot about that pen. And it takes a little bit of time to clean, but you're not going to necessarily destroy your pen. I mean, if you
Yeah.
leave it in there for 5 years maybe and then never touch it and pick it up, then
Right.
I think there can be some
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 issues.
some consequences to that. But it also depends on the ink manufacturer. There are inks that, in general, like are maybe a little bit better for your pens, and some there's like an pen that I had in had dried out. The ink had dried out, and it looks like it had a little bit of crud on it.
Mm-hmm.
I cleaned it. It was totally fine. It didn't do anything to my fountain pen. So
Great.
they're pretty easy to maintain. I think the cleaning process can be a little either for some people tedious or for other people therapeutic. Like I love sitting at like a sink, putting on some Netflix on my laptop and just like cleaning my fountain pens like that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the like every step of the way kind of feels like a process of decompressing or
Mm-hmm.
relaxing to me.
Oh, that sounds really kind of lovely. honestly. Have you been able to go back to, I mean, you said 2018?
Hmm.
So there were a couple years in there where you could have done more in-person fountain pen events. Were you able to get to any more, or was that like the big event and you're waiting for the post-COVID return?
Yeah, so 2019, I was in Europe, which is not a bad place to be, when the
Mm-hmm.
Chicago Pen Show happened. And then 2020, we all went through COVID. And so this year, the Chicago Pen Show did happen. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go. We had plans, and I also I I have spent my allowance on pens this year.
Okay.
So I was also just thinking about that.
Right.
Because
The temptation. Right.
you go to that show and you're just enabled by everyone around you to continue
Mm-hmm.
to buy more. And so I'm looking toward going next year, but I have people in Chicago who are part of the fountain pen community. We do little meetups. Like we'll
Mm-hmm.
go to Atlas Stationers together and we'll hang out. I'm also on a Slack channel
Mm-hmm.
that has about, I think, maybe 1,800 people around the world.
Yeah.
And it is specifically a fountain pen community Slack
Mm-hmm.
channel. And so there's like I'm on it and I'm like messaging with people, or there's like all of these threads where people are talking about like fountain pens, and people will post like their new pen days when they get a pen in
Mm-hmm.
the mail. So it's a really lovely community. Everyone is super nice, and they also have a pen pal Slack channel, so you can put your address in, and there's I could be a better pen pal than I have been this past year. But during COVID, that was like such a really beautiful way to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
I was writing to maybe like, I don't know, like 7 or 8 people, like from Germany to Switzerland to
Yeah.
Chicago, New York. Like I was connecting with all of these different people at a time where I felt really isolated and lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And to go down to your mailbox and see this really beautiful letter and someone, talking to you is a different way than just like that instant gratification of like
Mm-hmm.
texting someone. So that was a really wonderful aspect that came out of the community, and kind of this fountain pen collecting was the connection in other kind of forms during
Nice.
COVID. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds really lovely.
Yeah, it was really great. And people, some of them are artists, some of them are photographers. I've received art that they've done. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, they painted like a little image in like one of their letters, or I've received like photos that they've taken, and it's a really cool way to just get to know someone, a way that I think is not often used anymore. Like people are
Mm-hmm.
not writing letters or snail mail super often.
Right.
So
Are there inks or fountain pens that you're like, ooh, they're not my people? Like, do fountain pens, do people just have like a wide array of pens and they're generally nice, or are there any pens that are red flags?
yeah, I don't think that there's any pens that are red flags per se. Well, everyone collects really differently. So there are people who
Mm-hmm.
are very loyal to a brand. So there are people who love Mont Blanc and
Yeah.
only collect that. And then there are people who are, are like, I can't spend more than, $50, $60, maybe 100 is their top. So then any of the fountain pens they have are within that range, which there's some really amazing fountain
Mm-hmm.
pens that are really cheap. Like the Quaco Sport, my first fountain pen is like $26, which
Yeah.
for a pen is expensive in general.
But for a fountain pen is not.
Yes, yeah, or a Pilot Preppy. I recently purchased one. It's $7. It's amazing to write with. I was like freaking out over it. I have
Wow.
very expensive pens,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I love this. This is a great experience. And so it really can run the gamut.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of collect anything that aesthetically pleases me,
Yeah.
and I feel like if a fountain pen has a story behind it, I really love that. The fountain pen, the Mont Blanc Egyptomania, I wanted to be I wanted to be an Egyptologist when I was 7.
Yeah.
And I was really obsessed with Egypt and the pyramids and archaeology. And I watched all of the Nat Geo documentaries and went to the Field Museum. And so when that pen came onto market, I was like, I need it, because it just, for me, it's a nostalgia thing of reminding me of like some of my first, I think like obsessions, honestly.
Yeah.
First things I was really curious about. So that's kind of how, and there's certain brands that I love where I'm like, okay, I've written with this pen. I love it so much. And now if they come out with another that looks super pretty, I'm like, I also want that one.
Right.
So you kind of get to see what brands you like to write with. And then it kind of, through exploring that kind of stuff, like I've bought a lot of pens and I've sold a lot of pens in the process of my collecting because of just trying to figure out, oh, I really like this, or oh, I like it, but not enough to keep it because there are these other things that I enjoy more.
Yeah. What are other pens that you have with strong stories attached to them?
So I would say the Aurora Venus or Veneer, that this was like my first really expensive fountain pen. And so it's like this beautiful pink, but it was modeled after like the Greek goddess Venus. And for me, I just have always loved like mythology and folklore. And so just even having the name attached to that and there being some kind of story behind it, and how beautiful it was, that one just like is really special to me for that reason. Then another one that kind of follows the line of mythology is I have a pen from this company called Genesis.
Ooh.
It's called the Norse mythology pen. And so it has all of these Norse like images.
Yeah.
Like mythological images engraved on the cap and the body.
But the body is like transparent and it's covered in runes, yeah?
Yep. And
Very
then the
cool.
cap is like a kind of white. And then even on the section that you hold the pen, it has these engravings. And so for that, I just love how it looks. And then, there's those kind of, for me, really fun moments where I'm like, I'm reading a book about mythology, and so now I'm going to write with my pen,
with your
those kind of moments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those kind of moments where it's creating a whole experience for me that I find I get enjoyment out of.
Yeah. And do you have because that Norse pen is big.
It is big.
Is it, as you've collected and realized what you like, are there pens that are either like just too big or too, like, have you zeroed in on a right size pen? Like what feels good to write with?
Yeah, I have smaller hands. So that pen is unusual for me because it is so thick. It is a thicker body, and even the section where I hold it, it's thicker. That one feels comfortable to me. I think writing for super long periods, I would switch it out because what feels most comfortable is actually thinner and smaller pens. So some pens could be really, really, really long. And for me, depending on the weight of the material, it makes my hand or my wrist tired. So like lightweight, thin, and more compact fountain pen. So for example, there's a brand called, that I mentioned earlier, Pelican, and they have all of these different sizes, an M200, an M like 400, 600, and 800. And when you go up, it actually increases in size. And there are some pens that they make that are M800s that are really beautiful. Like I looked at them, I've really wanted one of them, and I tried in my hand, and it's just too big for me. And so this pen that I'm showing you is called the M200 Pelican Ruby. Yeah. And it's pretty small,
Yeah.
and pretty compact. And what can also change the size of the pen is if it can be what they call posted if you put the cap on the back. I
Mm.
don't post. There are people who always do. I don't. And so when I hold it, it's pretty, again, small in my hand and feels light to hold.
Yeah. So why don't you post?
Mostly because it comes down to the size
Okay.
aspect for me. So if when I post, I feel like it's a little bit too top heavy,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's uncomfortable for me to write. I
Yeah.
like things that are a little bit lightweight, because when writing with fountain pens, you should be able to kind of lightly write, like not dig your hand in and feel like you need to put a lot of pressure. So it's
Mm-hmm.
actually really it's really good on like your hand and on your wrist. And
Yeah.
I also sometimes experience like carpal tunnel syndrome,
Yeah.
and kind of having that like lightness and being able to write kind of almost like gliding over pages with the fountain pens
Yeah.
feels really nice for my hand and my
Nice.
wrist. Yeah.
Oh. And how about the world of inks?
Oh boy.
Now, when you give yourself your annual budget for fountain pens, is there a hardware and a inkware? You know, like is there an ink budget and a pen budget, or is it all in and you divide up? Like you seem like also an ink collector to me.
100%. Also, I should have an ink and a pen budget. I don't know what those are. Um, I don't have one. I just try not to to buy too much. Yeah, so I have, oh, I don't know, maybe like 30 bottles of ink or more,
Mm-hmm.
maybe closer to 50, honestly, at this point. There are all of these brands that are coming out with, I have a purple ink that has a silver shimmer, or I have a purple ink that is a slightly different hue that has pink undertones that then
Mm-hmm.
also has like, a gold shimmer. And so when you start going down the rabbit hole of ink,
Wow.
you see really beautiful just colors. It's like seeing different paints. And
Mm-hmm.
or as a kid, you have like the primary colors, colored pencils, and then you have the 60 pack, and then you have the 100 pack, and you're like, I want the 100.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't, but I did. I want the 100 pack. I want all of the different colors and hues to write or draw with different and do different things. And so, yeah, I have a lot of inks. I have like a little cart with inks, and then I have some of them on display as
Mm-hmm.
well. I tend to lean towards things with shimmer,
Mm-hmm.
inks with that are purple, pinks, and light blues.
Mm-hmm.
I really love a good pink. I think I have like 5 or 6 different shades of pink, which, for me, I'm like, oh, but this is a little bit more orangey, or this has like
Mm-hmm.
gold glitter, or this is, more of like a mauve. And they also have names to them. So sometimes there's, again, this story behind an ink that you're gravitating towards. So
Yeah.
when you use it, you're thinking of it. I have a ink that is called Pumpkin Cake.
Ooh.
It has a little pumpkin cake drawing on it that's so cute. It's from Monteverde, and when I have it in one of my pens because it's Halloween season, it feels
Mm-hmm.
festive to me. It's like a dark brown with an orangey undertone, and I love it. But
Yeah.
I don't, would I love it as much if it wasn't called pumpkin cake and didn't have this story? I am not sure. Like, I love it, like how it looks. I really love the color, but the story adds so much for me.
Right. Right.
And I've talked to other people who collect like fountain pens, and there's people who have extraordinary ink collections. And I think that tends to be a reoccurring theme, is that when there's this kind of story behind it, it makes it a little bit more intriguing to use and more
Mm-hmm.
enjoyable.
So you said that it was Alban? Blanc.
Monteverde.
Monteverde.
Yeah.
What are some other ink brands that you Do you have particular brands that you really like?
Yeah.
Or is it more like, ooh, that's a new uh, pink shimmer, and you don't care who the brand is, but you need the color?
So I have a few ink brands. So Sailor is one of them. They have these really beautiful ink lines, and they have a lot of inks that are called chroma shaders, which means
Mm-hmm.
they showcase more than one color. So it'll be purple, pink, and then maybe like a kind of blue hue to it. So depending
Yeah.
on the paper you use, you can see all of those properties of the ink come through,
So
which is
cool.
really beautiful. I also use some fountain pens to paint. Like I do watercolor painting. And so
Mm-hmm.
what is really fun is to use fountain pen ink, especially when they have these different properties that I
Yeah.
wouldn't quite get unless I was just way more masterful at like, mixing my colors.
Yeah.
Um, but so Sailor is, I believe, based in Japan. And then there are two there is Tono and Limbs, which
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit difficult to buy in the US. They are only distributed through this site called Shigure Inks, and they are made in Korea, the
Mm-hmm.
inks. And then Colorverse, which is a super fun brand, they are made in South Korea, and majority of their main lines are actually inspired by constellations or planets. They have a whole space
Ooh.
theme. And so all of the names that they use are taken from space.
Mm-hmm.
And they recently partnered with a distributor, I think luxury brands, so who's based in the US. And they decided to do a USA 50 states line. And so they came out with these little bottles where they're doing like from Cali is like this like very beautiful light lavender color,
Mm-hmm.
or they did Chi-Town, and they
Yeah.
actually named it Chi-Town instead of Chicago,
Right.
which I loved. And it's based off of kind of like the bean and the starry night. And so it
Mm-hmm.
has this, it's like a purplish black with like silver glitter. So it kind of mimics a night
Wow.
sky. Yeah.
Reflecting in the bean. That is amazing. That's so cool.
It's really fun when you kind of get into those aspects. So those are,
Right.
I would say, my top three favorite brands, especially because they will do kind of more glittery or chromo shading inks.
Mm-hmm.
There are some brands that do like a glitter ink,
Yeah.
but if glitter isn't fine enough, it'll get clogged and stuck in your
Sure.
pen. I've never ever had an issue with any of these inks performing well in my pen. So I would say that they're my favorite for that reason too.
Mm. Do you have a pen that's when I've talked to people that are super into bands, they have these chaser songs, these songs that they want to hear live. Do you have a fountain pen that like a list of pens that you really either want to like get to try at a convention or that are goals to own someday?
Yeah. So I think like in any collecting, there's like those grails, right? That people are like, oh,
Yeah.
I really either want that or it's too expensive. And so maybe just to handle. For me, one of my grails, I would just love to see in person, is a Mont Blanc inspired by Catherine the Great from
Mhm.
Russia. And it's this really beautiful gold pen that has like these like really ornate designs that have, and it has like a kind of burgundy undertones in it. And it's just really, it's kind of obnoxious, like it's designed. It's really, really ornate, but it's really beautiful. So that's a pen that would be really cool to own, but it's literally like maybe almost $4,000, and
Holy moly.
that's like a lot. Like I have expensive pens, I will say
Yeah.
that. But to spend that much money feels like I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if I will ever be there. But
Right.
if I could see one in person and hold it, that would be really cool. Or there are there's a pen brand that a lot of people in the community really like. It is a more expensive
Mhm.
pen. It's called Nakaya, and they have oftentimes a certain kind of lacquer called urushi, which it's handmade. And in order to, I believe, make or to have urushi on your pen, it's like a very like painstaking process. It's
Mm-hmm.
all done by hand, and it's a true talent and skill to do it. And it's not a lot of people have that skill, and it's oftentimes based in I think Nikaya is based in, I think, Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something where it's like the pen is also a piece of art. And I heard that they write really well. I've never handled one. And so it's something where I would love to know how it writes, because they are really pretty and maybe one day I could own one. But
Mm-hmm.
with something like that at that price point, I personally would only buy it if I've ever handled one before. So there's
Right.
kind of pens where I'm like, oh, I'm intrigued. Maybe I could get one, but I want to know what that feels like in my hand before I invest money that's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more significant. So I would say that those are my two pens that, and Nikaya isn't even a grail for me. I'm just so curious because so many
Yeah.
people love it. Or even the texture of urushi, like I've heard about, but I've never experienced myself. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me that you would want to be able to hold one and see, is it too heavy? Is it too scratchy on your skin to be like a nice writing experience? Because you don't want to. I'm sure there are collectors who buy them for display and aren't
Hmm.
also using it in their day to day. But if you're going to use pens in your day to day, you want pens that fit in your life.
Yeah, and do you like plastic? Do you like, maybe silver, or like do you like copper? Do you like like there's all these
Yeah.
materials that pens are made with, or celluloid or resin. So it really is fun to try things out in that sense. You're like, oh, I really like how this feels
Yeah.
in my hand. And the cool aspect of writing with fountain pens, it's such a sensory experience with like the touch, and then how it writes and how that feels. So
Yeah. Wow. Um, is there anything about fountain pen? I mean, there's a lot, but is there anything about fountain pens I haven't asked you about that if we hung up, you'd be so sad?
um so I think one of the things is just kind of where to start.
Yeah.
If you're interested in getting into fountain pens, I think if you try to take everything in, it can be a little overwhelming. And maybe if you see pens that are a little bit more expensive, you're like, is this better? Should I start higher price? I
Mm-hmm.
definitely recommend for beginning to try some of the like lower priced pens, um, especially if you can't go to a shop that is selling fountain pens. There's
Right.
a couple of shops around the United States that do that, do focus on fountain pens. There's the Fountain Pen Hospital in New York City, Atlas in Chicago, Van Ness Pens in Arkansas, um, Yoseka in New York. So there's a few, but if you're kind of like in a place where you can't find
Right.
one, I think Quaco Sports are pocket pens. So they are a little bit smaller, and those are really fun. Lamy is a brand that also has like a Lamy Safari, I think is like maybe $20.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they have different like nib variations. So fine, medium, broad. So you can try those out without breaking the bank. And with those you can also switch out ink, so if you wanted to try out different inks you can also do that. There's really cool websites like Goulet Pens or Van Ness that offer ink samples, because maybe you're like, I don't want to spend $15 or $20 on a 50 milliliter bottle of ink, where you're like, that's a
Right.
lot of ink. You can get little samples for like $2 or $3 of all of these different colors. And
Oh.
then you can see, oh, I like how this looks, or I don't like how that actually looks in person. So I would just recommend starting small and then figuring out what feels good to you in your hand,
Mm-hmm.
um, and don't be afraid to explore. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I would say for like beginners who are wanting to jump into the
Yeah.
hobby.
I have to say that the Pilot Decimo that you talked about is one that I'm like, ooh, maybe that's one I should try.
Yes, it is. also just like such a good pen. It's
Yeah.
like a workhorse too. Like I use it pretty consistently through like work.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that it's a clickable. So it's just like it's, pull it out, quick to use. And for the price point, it's on the like medium side, depending on where you're
Yeah.
at and you're collecting. It's not horribly priced. And for what you're getting, like a 14 karat gold nib, oftentimes when being put in a pen, jacks up the price a ton.
Yeah.
But with that pen, you could actually get it for really like a reasonable, I think it's like 150
Yeah.
for that. For again, what you're getting is just like way better than like the actual cost of it.
Yeah. I'm on Goulet pen right now looking at it.
Yeah, and they have cute colors. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think part of it for me is I was obsessed in high school and college and into my 20s with the Pilot pen that you could see that
was it a demonstrator? Like you could see through it,
you could
like
see through
body?
it, and it was just like really inky in a like really delightful way. And
Hmm.
if you could use one, like use all the ink in it, it felt like very responsible. It
Yeah.
was like using all the chapstick.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so Pilot for me is a brand that I have loved my whole life. So that's I think why the Pilot Decimo seems like, well, this is a pen brand that I've always trusted and enjoyed
Hmm.
using. So,
Oh, I love that. You should check out Atlas, where you can
mhm.
try them out in person because they have the Decimo is a thinner version of the Pilot Vanishing Point. So the
Okay.
Vanishing Point is a little bit thicker. So again, depending on what writing experience you like and what kind of the
Yeah.
girth of a pen, yeah, I would say that that's a place since you're based in Chicago, you could easily check
Right.
out. And then they're really great. The people there, it's family owned. They've owned it for many, many decades,
Mhm.
and they're just so sweet. And they'll let you take out even the most expensive pen and try it out at their store. They're not those people who are like, "Oh no, you can't try
Mhm.
it out." They're like, "Oh yes, here, try it out." Without any expectation to for you to buy it. Like they're not.
Right.
I hate going into places where like I just want to see it because I can't afford it.
Right. Right. Now, you did mention even before we hit record that you recently started a new YouTube channel.
Yeah,
Uh,
I got into comics.
yeah.
I am a huge, I think I collect lots of different things, fountain pens. I think they kind of revolve around the same aspect of like reading and papers, materials, and whatnot. And in the last year and a half, I got really into comics and comic
Yeah.
collecting. And what I love about any collecting or hobby is that there's oftentimes a community around it.
Mhm.
And I didn't have any friends who were into comics. I was
Yeah.
really just on this journey by myself, and I was really craving community. And so I was watching a lot of YouTube videos of people talking about comics, and I was like fangirling a little bit, like, oh,
Mhm.
it would be so cool to talk to that person. So I started an Instagram and then I started a YouTube. And I have to say, the comic community is like the nicest group of humans. Like, I've
Mhm.
experienced nothing but such warm friendship from tons of people and such support in a
Yeah.
very like short amount of time. I think I started the YouTube channel a month ago,
Okay.
and I've been on like four different YouTube channels with other
Mhm.
people just wanting to support me and get to know me and just chat about comics. So,
Nice. What are the main storylines or genres or characters that you are collecting?
so I read Jonathan Hickman's House of X, Power of X, which is an X-Men storyline, and I
Mhm.
knew nothing about X-Men. And I read it, and it's just packed. It has so much depth to it. It
Yeah.
really goes into, you know, people who are feeling oppressed, like how do you rise up? Like what are those different pathways?
Mhm.
What does it like look like to fight back to try to create space for yourself when
Mm-hmm.
people don't want to make that space. Um, it dives into like, who is God? What is God?
Wow.
Like, there's just a lot of threads. It deals with like moral responsibility and ethics with technology and the pursuit of like technological advances and AI. And I'm like reading it, and I'm like, this is like X-Men. And then here are these really powerful panels and writing. He's just a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic writer. And I was really blown away. I was my a friend of mine had read it, and we were talking about it, and I was just having these really deep conversations about it, and it kind of sparked this curiosity in X-Men. And so kind of down that rabbit hole currently. And really, I'm reading a lot of just like Marvel and
Yeah.
certain indie titles. Horror is having a huge moment in comics right now,
Mm-hmm.
which is perfect for the spooky season.
Yes.
So one that I've picked up, I have not read, but I've heard nothing but good things. And I think it's just so fun to plug, is called Stray Dogs. And it's a horror comic with
Okay.
all of these cute little puppy dogs. And supposedly it's both cute and equally scary.
Okay.
And it's like beloved by it. It's like a huge sensation.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny to me is like I saw it and it almost looks like a kid's comic, but it's not. And then you just have all these like men who are this like, just not who you'd see picking up that comic.
Yeah.
They're like, I love Stray Dogs, and like the covers are really cool. For the single issues, they did famous horror films, but with like a dog as so they had like a Silence of the Lambs
Uh-huh.
cover, but like this like little cute puppy with like the little butterfly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
um So that was a really, like, I picked it up. I'm planning on reading it this month, but it's been reviewed tremendously,
Mm.
and I feel like the premise of it is just so wild,
Yeah.
honestly.
Do you have a local comic shop that you go to?
So I love Alley Cat Comics
Mm-hmm.
in Andersonville. They have like, you walk through a little alleyway. It's
Yeah.
almost like a speakeasy situation. You walk by through this alley behind these buildings, and then there's this awesome comic shop. And Dark Tower Comics in Chicago as well has like these beautiful murals of superheroes. And
Mm-hmm.
I just remember passing by it when I was a little kid and just being in awe of it. And
Yeah.
finally went in, and now just occasionally shop there.
Nice.
Yeah.
And where can people find you on YouTube?
Yeah, so my YouTube name is Shy Comic Girl, and you can find me there. And also the Instagram is also Shy Comic Girl, or Shy Comic underscore girl
Yeah.
on Instagram.
Great. Is there anything else you would like to promote?
No, I think you could find me there. I will say, if you're really into fountain pens, I don't post as often, but me having the little outlets that I have an Instagram called Ephemeral Lines, and it's just beautiful pictures of my fountain pens.
Wonderful. Hailey, just ephemeral lines. So do we get to see your ink or just your fountain pens?
You get to see ink and fountain pens.
Okay.
And if you go to like people I'm following, you will find equally just so much like more accounts of people
Mm-hmm.
just posting fountain pens and their journal setups and their planner setups. And there's a lot of
Nice.
really fun, the internet is a wonderful place sometimes. You can just
Yeah.
find about anything.
I have occasionally considered doing a bullet journal. And so I've never committed to it, but I'm familiar with like that little corner of the Instagram
Mhm.
of people setting up their bullet journals and their monthly designs and I have a couple other friends who are super into fountain pens. So it's come through my feeds before, but I'm going to link to everything that we talked about in the show notes so that people can go down the rabbit hole with you.
If I just enable one person through this show, I will have feel like this is a success. No, I'm just kidding. This is a great conversation, but I am just here to turn everyone into fountain pen lovers.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Hailey. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Chicago Leah, Shy Leah on Instagram. The podcast is Finding Faves Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And please follow and subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, because all the other podcasters say it matters, so it must matter. So thank you so much, Hailey. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.